You're coming to my neck of the woods here, I think, later this week, actually, here in Iowa. Yeah, for why are you coming to Iowa here, other than it's just a great place to actually experience a white Christmas, unlike Virginia most of the time?
Well, I was thinking about going on a golf tour of Iowa in December, but I hear it might not be the best. I am coming to speak at a couple of local gatherings, mostly of the local Republican groups and conservative groups, to talk to them about the Convention of States, which I'm, as you know, the co-founder of the Convention of States project. And so I'm there to explain to them why, if we're really going to rein in the abuse of power by the federal government in the long haul, we need to have the values of the founders, and that is structural restraints that are enforced constitutionally are the only way to protect our freedom in the long haul. And that's what we're trying to do, to impose fiscal restraints, term limits, and other general limitations on the power of the federal government. 19 states have passed this, all conservative Republican states, and we're trying to get the conservative Republican state of Iowa to do the same thing.
With a lot of our partners here on the show, a lot of our messaging right now is, hey, it's great that we won this election, but do not get complacent, right? I mean, the forces that we are up against, they're not getting complacent at all. They're going to keep coming. So take advantage of these moments and these opportunities. I think there's a temptation to say, well, we won, so we don't really need something this drastic anymore. But I would actually go back to the conversation we just had with you, before you came on. I mean, the reason why somebody like a Trump has so many of these entrenched interests they're up against, right? I mean, it's the amount of money you'd have to raise in South Carolina to take out Lindsey Graham, with all the vested interest in the swamp that want to make sure there's as many Republicans like that. It's very difficult to do. 30 years, Mike, we've defeated 3 incumbent Republican senators in primaries who were elected by the people, and a lot more than 3 deserved to get primary out of office in the last 30 years, right? So, yes. I think this even applies to the Convention of States. As you watch the entrenched interests now that Trump is going to try to go up against, even if even letting RFK Jr. ask questions. All right. Even if RFK Jr. is wrong about everything, finds out he's wrong, just the asking of questions is such a threat to these interests that they're so entrenched. I think that this actually is making the argument for things like term limits that the Convention of States argues for.
Indeed. And, just the nature of the process. If we get to 35 states in the next couple of years, and let's say we have a convention, and in 6 months we draft 3 or 4 great amendments, it's going to take another 5 or 6 years before they all get ratified. Mm-hmm. So there's no scenario where Donald Trump is still president when this is finishing up the process. There'll be somebody else. And so we're about the long haul. This is a generational level project that will last for 2 or 3 good generations. It will have 100 years of effect at a minimum. And that's the kind of structural changes the founders expected. The reason Article 5 is written the way it is George Mason said, there's going to be some day that this federal government abuses its authority. And when that happens, Washington, D.C. will never propose anything that limits its own power. So no constitutional amendments limiting federal power will ever come out of Washington, D.C. The states have to have the unilateral ability to propose and ratify amendments. 2/3 of the states propose, 3/4 of the states ratify. When that happens, we've got a national level consensus justifying a constitutional amendment to rein in federal abuse of power. And if people don't think there's a federal abuse of power, well, they're just wrong. And the vast majority of Americans agree with that. The vast majority think there's abuse of power and something should be done. Well, this is the something the founders gave us. And we're 19 states out of 34 there. Iowa needs to become the 20th.
What you're describing really is a scenario where election by election, our fundamental God-given rights are up for a vote. That's. And you're old enough, and I'm almost old enough to remember when that was not the case, where elections were hard fought, but the margins of fundamental life that you lived differently in America likely came down to 2 or 3 economic policies that one side had compared to the other. Someone's fundamental free speech rights, for example, or whether their church was going to be open, or they could pray in public for a political position, was not something that just on a election by election basis, that level of existential, debate was not up for argumentation like it is right now. And so to me, I only see 2 options to fix that. Revival is so that we have we're a people of social compact and shared values again. Short of that, it's what you guys are offering. I don't know what the other options are to not have every election be existential and we're at each other's throats for the rest of our lives.
I think you're right on both counts. And of course, revival would have to be implemented. And the way that the revival might be implemented is through a convention of states. But nonetheless, those really are your options. Any other talk of, let's just go win a few more elections. Well, I've been reading newspapers every day since about 1957. Let me tell you, elections matter. Elections are important. But no election by itself is going to result in the kind of change, because those are only personnel changes and policy changes. Structural changes are what the founders put a lot of stake in for the preservation of freedom. And if you don't nail down power restrictions on the federal government, they will take our freedoms, because power is the opposite of freedom. We can't have absolute power. We can't have absolute freedom. That's anarchy. But the balance is way out of whack, and we've got to move it much further in the freedom direction than is our current lot. And the only way to do that is to restrict power. And the only way to do that is with constitutional amendments written correctly that restrict the federal government's power to do a lot of things that they're doing currently that they shouldn't be doing at all.
Folks, you want to learn more, you can go to conventionofstates.com, plural, conventionofstates.com. Again, head over to conventionofstates.com. And welcome to Iowa, Mike, and have a good time, brother. Good to see you again. And again, Merry Christmas to you, okay?
Thank you, Steve. Merry Christmas to you and your family.
All right, you bet. Thank you, sir.